You can have a beautiful degree, a polished job title, an expensive laptop, and still become economically useless after one collapse. That is the hardest truth in the labor market. Not because knowledge has no value, not because education is a mistake, but because in a crisis, the world no longer politely asks where you went to school, what degree you earned, or which company you used to work for. It asks one much colder question: what problem can you still solve when the system is no longer standing behind you? Today, in this video, I will tell you the story of business case, the jobs that survive collapse. You are not watching the wrong video. This is not a video made to insult educated people, and it is not a blind celebration of manual labor either. This is a cold, hard economic lesson that history has proven again and again. When currencies collapse, banks freeze, inflation eats through wages, companies cut jobs, and artificial intelligence begins replacing repetitive white-collar work. Your value no longer lives on a business card. It lives in your ability to create real value. I want you to imagine a very ordinary morning. You wake up, open your phone, and check your work email. There is a message from your company. It is short, emotionless, and there is no apology deep enough to match the years you gave them. The company is restructuring. Your position is no longer needed. You sit still for a few seconds. The room is the same. Your coffee is still warm. Your shirt is still hanging on the chair. But inside you, something has fallen very far. You thought you were safe. You had a college degree. You knew how to use software. You knew how to write reports. You knew how to attend meetings. You knew how to follow procedures. You had a professional-sounding title in English. But then one day, the market changed. AI became faster. The company cut costs. Customers disappeared. Budgets shrank. And you realized something painful. Maybe you had a position, but maybe you did not truly have a marketable skill. This is not new. It happened in Leipzig, Germany, in November 1722. A concert pianist who had trained for 15 years, who had once performed in elegant halls, suddenly found himself begging for bread during hyperinflation. Meanwhile, a plumber with no artistic glory, no applause, and no elite status still managed to eat 3 meals a day. Why? Because when money dies, when wages lose, meaning when prices run faster than reason itself, people stop paying for the prestige of a profession. They pay for whatever keeps life functioning. A broken pipe still needs fixing. An old car still needs to run. A house still needs electricity. A kitchen still needs water. A sick person still needs care. A family still needs food. And this is the part many modern people do not want to hear. In good times, society can pay for the appearance of value. But in a crisis, the market only pays for value that can be touched, used, exchanged, and applied to a real problem. Argentina in December 2001 told the same story. When the country defaulted, banks froze, ATMs ran dry, and the middle class poured into the streets in panic. Many jobs that once looked stable suddenly lost their footing. But the mechanic kept working, because when people could no longer afford new cars, they had to keep their old cars alive for years. An old Renault was no longer just transportation. It was the way to get to work, the way to take a child to school, the tool that kept a family moving. And the person who could repair it became part of the survival infrastructure. Cuba, in 1993, showed the same pattern. When there was a shortage of oil, medicina, equipment, and electricity, a medical degree still mattered. But it was no longer enough if the hospital system behind it was paralyzed. The person who could care for people under scarcity, treat wounds, maintain hygiene, recognize danger, and protect a community became impossible to ignore. Russia, in the summer of 1992, left behind another brutal lesson. After the Soviet Union collapsed, wages and pensions were crushed by inflation, but many families did not starve. Not because they were rich, but because they still knew how to grow potatoes, raise vegetables, preserve food, and survive the winter through small Dacha gardens. Do you see it? A crisis does not only destroy money, it exposes the real value of human beings. It asks the repair worker, can you make broken things work again? It asks the person who understands money, do you know where real value is moving? It asks the person who understands food, can you turn soil, seeds, and time into a meal? It asks the person with medical knowledge, can you help people survive when the system is overwhelmed? And it asks the educated professional, beyond your certificate, what value can you create if the company, the bank, the hospital, the court, the platform, the algorithm, or the government no longer works the way it did yesterday? This video is not made to scare you. It is made to wake you up. Because the biggest question of this era is no longer, what job pays the most? The bigger question is, what skill still has value when the world becomes unstable? If you work in an office, do not panic, but do not fall asleep inside your title. If you are in college, do not look down on education, but do not confuse a degree with ability. If you have a stable job, to be grateful for it, but do not let your entire financial life depend on a chair that someone else has the power to pull away at any moment. In this video, I will take you through 3 major lessons. First, when money breaks, the people who can repair things and read real value survive. Second, when society runs short, the people who can produce food and protect health never lose all their value. Third, in the age of AI, a degree is a derivative asset, but real skill is the underlying asset. Stay until the end of this video, because after you understand the crises of Weimar Germany, Argentina, Cuba, Russia, Lebanon, and Venezuela, you will no longer look at your career the same way. You will not only ask how much money you make, you will ask how useful you remain when money loses value. You will not only ask what degree you have, you will ask what skill you can exchange directly with real life. And maybe, just maybe, this will be the moment you stop building your safety on a fragile job title and start building it on something no recession can easily take away. Your real ability. When money breaks, people who can repair things and read real value survive. When the system breaks, the market stops paying for prestige. A crisis does not care about your title. It cares about what you can still fix. That is the first brutal lesson from Leipzig, Germany. In November 1720, one man was a concert pianist. 15 years of training, elegant halls, applause, culture, status. The other man was a plumber who had learned his trade from an uncle when he was 16. In normal times, society admired the pianist more, but hyperinflation changed the question. The world no longer asked, who is more respected? It asked, who can solve a problem today? The pianist could play beauty into a room, but beauty could not repair a broken pipe. It could not keep heat moving through a house. It could not stop water from flooding a kitchen. The plumber had no glamour, but he had usefulness. And when money dies, Usefulness becomes a harder currency than reputation. This is the part many educated people do not want to hear. Education is valuable. But education is not the same as exchange value in a crisis. A degree can open doors when the building is still standing. But when the building is burning, the market does not ask for your diploma. It asks if you can carry water, fix wires, repair engines, move food, protect health, or translate broken money into real value. That is why the plumber ate. Not because he was morally better, not because the pianist was foolish, but because collapse changes demand. In good times, people buy upgrades. In bad times, people buy survival. And survival starts with keeping broken things alive. The lesson is simple. When the economy is stable, prestige can be expensive. But when the economy collapses, usefulness becomes priceless. And now we move to the next truth. When people can no longer replace things, the person who can repair them becomes infrastructure. The repair economy grows when people can no longer afford new things. Argentina, December 2008. The country defaulted on roughly $93 billion of sovereign debt. Banks froze. ATMs ran dry. The peso was about to lose its old relationship with the dollar. Middle-class families were in the streets, banging pots, demanding answers from a system that had locked away their money. But inside a mechanic's garage, something different happened. The work did not disappear. It increased. Before the crisis, a family might trade in a car every few years. After the crisis, that same family needed the old car to last another decade. A 1995 Renault was no longer just an old vehicle. It became the way a father got to work, the way a mother took her child to school, the way a small business delivered goods, the way a family remained connected to income, and the mechanic who could keep that car running became essential. This is what I call the repair economy. It appears whenever replacement becomes too expensive. When people cannot buy a new car, they repair the old one. When they cannot replace the refrigerator, they repair the motor. When they cannot rebuild the house, they patch the roof. When they cannot upgrade the electrical system, they call the electrician, who knows how to make the existing system survive one more year. This is why repair skills are different from many other skills. They do not depend entirely on prosperity. They often become more valuable when prosperity weakens. A corporate job may disappear when budgets are cut. A luxury service may collapse when people stop spending. But the pipe still leaks. The engine still fails. The roof still cracks. The machine still stops. And somebody still needs to make it work again. That is the strange power of repair work. It is not fancy. It is not always respected in polite society, but it sits close to reality. And reality always wins during collapse. The modern lesson is clear. If your skill depends on people feeling rich, you are exposed. If your skill helps people survive feeling poor, you are stronger. This does not mean everyone must become a mechanic, plumber, electrician, or technician. But everyone should understand the principle. The closer your skill is to a real, unavoidable human need, the harder it is for a crisis to erase you. And then comes the deeper layer. In collapse, things break. But money breaks too. And when money breaks, another kind of repair worker appears. Not the person who repairs pipes. The person who repairs the meaning of price. When money breaks, the person who reads real value becomes powerful. Every monetary crisis creates two worlds, the official world and the real world. The official world says one thing. The market says another. The government may declare a currency stable, but the street, the shopkeeper, the landlord, the importer, and the family buying food know the truth faster. Argentina showed this again in October 2011. On streets like Florida and Laval in Buenos Aires, informal currency traders whispered one word: cambio, exchange. They were not famous economists. Many had no elite credentials, but they understood something incredibly valuable. They could read the gap between the official exchange rate and the real exchange rate people trusted in daily life. This is not a lesson about breaking the law. It is a lesson about economic reality. When a currency loses trust, price stops being simple. One number appears on official screens. Another number appears in actual transactions. People no longer ask only, "How many pesos do I have?" They ask, "What can these pesos still become? Dollars, food, fuel, gold, tools, rent, medicine?" That ability to translate between dying money and real value becomes a survival skill. Lebanon from 2019 to 2023 showed the same pattern. The Lebanese pound collapsed from around 1,500 to the dollar to levels near 89. 0.00 to the dollar. Banks froze. Savings were trapped. An entire middle class watched numbers remain in accounts, while real purchasing power disappeared. In that environment, people who understood exchange, cash, dollars, local prices, and real purchasing power became necessary. They were not merely traders. They were translators. Because when money stops telling the truth, society desperately needs people who can read what things are really worth. That is the monetary translation skill. It means understanding the difference between nominal value and real value. It means knowing that a salary increase means nothing if food rises faster. It means knowing that a bank balance is not wealth if you cannot withdraw it or use it. It means knowing that official prices can become theater when real markets are operating somewhere else. It means knowing that in a crisis, the question is never just, "How much money do I have?" The question is, "What can this money still command?" This is where many people are destroyed. They keep trusting the number after the number has stopped telling the truth. They see a balance. They see a wage. They see a pension. They see an official exchange rate. But they do not see the purchasing power leaving quietly through the back door. The lesson is harsh. When money breaks, financial literacy is no longer optional. It becomes self-defense. You must understand inflation. You must understand exchange rates. You must understand cash flow. You must understand hard assets. You must understand the difference between looking paid and being protected. Because in every collapse, there are people who keep score in the dying currency until the game is already over. And there are others who learn to read the real scoreboard. The first survivors are the ones closest to reality. So this is the first great lesson of jobs that survive collapse. When the system breaks, two kinds of people become valuable immediately. The person who can repair broken things, and the person who can read broken money. One keeps physical life moving. The other keeps economic life understandable. The repair worker says, "I can make this car run, this pipe flow, this wire carry power, this machine continue working." The monetary translator says, "I can tell you what this money is really worth, where value is moving, and how to avoid confusing official numbers with actual life." Both skills sit close to reality, and that is why they survive. They do not depend entirely on applause. They do not depend entirely on institutions. They do not depend entirely on people feeling rich. They answer direct problems. Something is broken. Fix it. Money is lying. Translate it. That is why the pianist in 1923 could lose his economic footing while the plumber remained needed. That is why the mechanic in Argentina kept working while banks froze. That is why people who understood exchange in Argentina and Lebanon became important when official money lost credibility. The modern lesson is not to despise education. The lesson is to build usefulness underneath education. Do not only ask what title you have, ask what breaks when you disappear. Do not only ask what your salary is, ask whether your skill still matters when budgets shrink. Do not only ask how much money is in your account, ask what that money can still buy when fear enters the system. Because collapse strips away decoration, it strips away status. It strips away polite illusions. And then it leaves one question on the table. Can you still solve a problem that people cannot ignore? If the answer is yes, you are not helpless. But repair and money are only the first layer, because when crisis deepens, people do not only need cars, pipes, cash, or exchange rates. They need food. They need health. They need the knowledge that keeps the human body alive when stores are empty and institutions are overwhelmed. That is where we go next. When society runs short, people who can produce food and protect health never lose all value. Hunger exposes the difference between owning land and knowing how to use it. When a crisis becomes deep enough, the economy stops asking what you believe. It asks what you can eat. That is the brutal lesson from Russia. In the summer of 1992, the Soviet Union had been dead for only 8 months. The old system that once promised jobs, pension, food distribution, and national order had collapsed into confusion. Inflation was destroying savings. Store shelves were empty. Salaries arrived late. And when they arrived, they bought less than before. For millions of families, money became unreliable. But potatoes were still potatoes. Cabbage was still cabbage. Food was still survival. That is why the Russian Dacha became one of the most important survival assets of that period. A Dacha was not usually a large farm. It was often a small plot of land outside the city. But in 1992, those small plots helped families feed themselves when the formal economy failed. But listen carefully. The land alone did not save them. Knowledge did. A person with land, but no agricultural knowledge, was still fragile. Soil does not automatically become dinner. Seeds do not become food because you are hungry. A garden does not feed a family because it exists on paper. You must know when to plant. You must know how to protect crops. You must know how to harvest. You must know how to store root vegetables through winter. You must know how to preserve food without poisoning your family. That is the difference between property and productive knowledge. The owner of land may look rich in good times, but the person who knows how to turn land into food becomes powerful in bad times. This is the lesson. In a food crisis, the most valuable person is not always the person with the biggest asset. It is the person who understands the process that turns nature, time, and discipline into survival. Food knowledge is not nostalgia. It is economic security. Modern people are trained to think of food as a product. Something packaged, something delivered, something waiting under supermarket lights, something bought with a card and placed inside a refrigerator. But history reminds us that food is not just a product. Food is a system, and when that system breaks, the person who only understands consumption becomes fragile. The person who understands production becomes valuable. In Russia, after the Soviet collapse, food knowledge survived because families had kept it alive. Grandparents knew what younger people had forgotten. Families knew how to grow potatoes, preserve vegetables, store food, and stretch ingredients through hard months. This was not romantic. It was not a lifestyle trend. It was survival economics. Argentina, after the crisis of December 2001, showed the same pattern. When banks froze, unemployment spread, and formal money became harder to trust. Barter networks grew. People began trading goods and services directly. Inside those networks, practical production skills mattered. A person who could make food had value. A person who could preserve food had value. A person who could repair clothing had value. A person who could care for children had value. A person who could turn raw materials into something useful had value. Because when the official economy breaks, exchange does not disappear. It becomes more honest. People stop asking what your title is. They ask what you can bring to the table. Literally. And this lesson matters even if you live in a city. You do not need to become a farmer to become less fragile. You can learn how to cook cheaply, store food intelligently, reduce waste, preserve basic ingredients, understand nutrition, and organize with your community. This is not fear. This is economic awareness. The modern food system is built on long supply chains, farms, fuel, trucks, ports, warehouses, supermarkets, payment systems, and refrigeration all have to work together before food reaches your plate. When everything works, it feels normal. But when fuel becomes scarce, prices rise, logistics fail, or money loses value. The meal on your table reveals how many invisible systems were holding it there. The lesson is simple. The more basic the human need, the more dangerous it is to know nothing about it. And food is the most basic economic need of all. But hunger is not the only danger in a crisis. Disease appears too. Injuries appear. Exhaustion appears. Fear weakens the body. And when the healthcare system becomes overwhelmed, another kind of knowledge becomes priceless. When hospitals weaken, practical health knowledge becomes a survival skill. Cuba, 1993. The country was deep inside what became known as the Special Period. The Soviet Union had collapsed. Cuba lost a massive share of its oil imports and trade. Fuel became scarce. Transportation weakened. Food became harder to obtain. Electricity became unreliable. Hospitals faced shortages of medicine, equipment, and basic supplies. Now, imagine being a doctor in that environment. You have years of training. You have a respected credential. You know medicine. But the hospital has no reliable electricity. The pharmacy shelves are thin. The equipment is missing. The supply chain has failed. Suddenly, the painful truth appears. A medical degree is powerful, but only when the system around it can help turn knowledge into treatment. This does not mean the degree is useless. That would be foolish. Medical training remains one of the most valuable forms of human knowledge. But Cuba showed that credentials alone are not enough. What mattered was practical, adaptable medical knowledge, the ability to examine a patient carefully, the ability to recognize danger without advanced machines, the ability to manage wounds with limited supplies, the ability to prevent infection, the ability to understand nutrition, hygiene, hydration, and basic community health, the ability to protect life when the perfect system is not available. Let me be very clear. This is not an argument against doctors. This is not an argument for replacing hospitals. This is not an invitation to pretend internet knowledge equals medical training. That kind of arrogance can kill people. The real lesson is more serious. A society becomes stronger when ordinary people understand basic health, and professionals know how to adapt when institutions are under pressure. Because in a collapse, the hospital may still matter deeply, but it may not reach everyone fast enough. And between the moment something goes wrong and the moment professional help arrives, basic knowledge can decide whether a family panics or acts. Clean water, clean hands, safe food, basic wound care, warmth, rest, nutrition, sanitation, knowing when a symptom is dangerous, knowing when to seek professional help immediately. These are not small things. They are the foundation of survival. Health is not separate from economics. Health is the foundation that allows economics to continue. A hungry person cannot work well. A sick person cannot produce. An exhausted family cannot plan. A fearful community cannot trade with confidence. In every crisis, the human body becomes the final balance sheet. The people closest to basic needs become hardest to erase. Food and health reveal a truth that polite society often forgets. The economy is not built first on banks, offices, brands, apps, or titles. It is built on bodies that must eat and survive. A mother with an empty pantry wants food. A father with a feverish child wants care. A family facing winter wants warmth, calories, and safety. This is why the people who understand basic needs never lose all value. The gardener, the cook, the food preserver, the farmer, the caregiver, the nurse, the practical doctor, the person who understands hygiene, the person who can organize supplies, the person who can turn scarcity into stability. They may not always be the richest in good times. They may not always receive the highest respect when markets are booming and everyone is chasing luxury, technology, and status. But when society runs short, they move closer to the center, because they are close to what humans cannot postpone. You can postpone buying a new phone. You can postpone a vacation. You can postpone a luxury car. But you cannot postpone hunger forever. You cannot postpone infection forever. You cannot postpone the human body forever. That is the great humility crisis teaches. The most advanced society is still dependent on the simplest needs. So ask yourself, do you know how your food reaches you? Do you know how to eat if prices rise sharply? Do you know how to reduce waste? Do you know how to preserve basic supplies? Do you know how to care for yourself and others when the system is slow, crowded, or overwhelmed? Because this is the second great lesson of jobs that survive collapse. When society runs short, people who understand food and health become anchors. Russia, in 1992, showed that food knowledge can protect families when salaries fail. Argentina, in 2001, showed that production skills can become currency inside barter networks. Cuba, in 1993, showed that practical health knowledge matters when medical institutions are short on supplies. And all of them teach the same truth. The closer your skill is to keeping human beings alive, the harder it is for a crisis to make you useless. But now, we must go to the final layer. Why do these skills survive while so many prestigious credentials lose power? The answer is uncomfortable. A credential is often a derivative asset. A real skill is the underlying asset. And in the age of AI, that difference is no longer history. It is becoming personal. In the age of AI, a degree is a derivative asset. Real skill is the underlying asset. A credential is powerful only while the system behind it still works. A degree is not useless. Let me be very clear. Education can open doors. It can raise income. It can sharpen thinking. It can give a person language, discipline, confidence, and access to rooms they could not enter before. But a degree has one weakness. Most people discover too late. It depends on a system that agrees to value it. A law degree needs functioning courts. A medical degree needs hospitals. Medicina. Electricity, equipment, and supply chains. An accounting credential needs businesses with books to close. A corporate title needs a company that still has money to pay you. That is why a credential is often a derivative asset. Its value is derived from the institution behind it. But a real skill is different. A real skill proves itself through use. It does not ask for applause. It does not wait for permission. It solves a problem directly. That is why, in Leipzig, Germany, in November 1792, a trained concert pianist could beg for bread while a plumber still ate. The pianist had culture, training, and prestige. But the plumber could solve a problem people could not ignore. That is why, in Cuba, in 1970-30, during the special period, medical credentials still mattered. But the deepest value belonged to doctors and caregivers who could adapt when hospitals lacked supplies. The lesson is not that credentials are bad. The lesson is that credentials are strongest when they sit on top of real skill. A diploma may introduce you, but skill must defend you. AI is exposing the difference between position and ability. For decades, many people believed white-collar work was safe because it looked intellectual. You had a laptop. You had meetings. You had reports. You had a title. You had a salary. You had a calendar full of things that felt important. But now AI is asking a brutal question. Is your work judgment, creativity, strategy, and human trust? Or is it just repeatable information processing, wearing a nice shirt? Because if your job is mostly copying, summarizing, formatting, reporting, scheduling, comparing, entering data, or following a predictable workflow, then you must be honest with yourself. A machine does not need your chair. It only needs your task. This is the new shock. In the past, collapse came from hyperinflation, frozen banks, broken currencies, failed states, and destroyed supply chains. In the modern world, collapse can also come quietly through software. A department does not need to burn down. It can simply become smaller. A company does not need to fail. It can simply decide that 10 people plus AI can do what 30 people did before. And suddenly, someone with a good degree and a professional title discovers the painful truth. They had a position, but not enough marketable ability. That is why the question is no longer, what is your job? The question is, what can you do that still matters when the job title disappears? Can you sell? Can you build? Can you repair? Can you manage money? Can you communicate clearly? Can you lead people through uncertainty? Can you use AI as leverage instead of becoming its victim? Can you create value outside one company? On a platform, one boss, one workflow? If the answer is no, then your income may be more fragile than it looks. The safest skill is the one that solves a real problem without needing perfect conditions. History is not telling you to reject modern life. It is telling you not to become helpless inside it. The strongest workers of the future will not be the people who hate technology. They will be the people who combine deep human usefulness with modern tools. A mechanic who uses diagnostics well becomes stronger. A nurse who understands both care and systems becomes stronger. A farmer who understands logistics and markets becomes stronger. A financial educator who can explain inflation, debt, and cash flow in plain language becomes stronger. A business operator who can sell, manage people, read numbers, and use AI becomes stronger. The danger is not AI itself. The danger is being a person whose only value was doing what AI can now do faster, cheaper, and without fear. So do not ask only, what degree do I have? Ask, what problem can I solve under pressure? Do not ask only, what company employs me? Ask, who would still need my ability if this company disappeared? Do not ask only, how much do I earn? Ask, how durable is the skill behind that income? That is the final lesson of jobs that survive collapse. In good times, society rewards polish. In hard times, it rewards usefulness. In good times, titles can impress. In hard times, results speak louder. In good times, credentials can lift you. In hard times, only real skill can carry you. The people who survive are not always the most prestigious. They are the ones who remain useful when the system becomes less generous. So build your education, respect your degree, use technology, learn AI, but never confuse the frame with the foundation. Your title is not the foundation. Your employer is not the foundation. Your diploma is not the foundation. Your real ability is the foundation. Because when institutions weaken, when currencies shake, when companies cut, when algorithms replace tasks, and when the market becomes cruel, the world will not ask what you used to be called. It will ask what you can still do, and that answer may decide whether you become another case study or the person who survives the case study. The world will not pay you for what you were called. It will pay you for what you can still do. Economic collapse has a cruel way of removing decoration. It strips away titles. It strips away prestige. It strips away the polite stories we tell ourselves about safety. And then it leaves one question standing in the room. What can you still do when the system no longer protects you? Leipzig, Germany. November, 1923, showed us that culture and training may not be enough when money dies. Argentina, December 2010, showed us that the person who can repair broken things becomes essential when people can no longer afford new ones. Russia, Samma tusen och 1992, showed us that food knowledge can protect families when salaries and pensions are crushed. Cuba, 1993, showed us that practical health knowledge matters when hospitals lack medicine. Electricity and equipment, Lebanon, from 2019 to 2023, showed us that people who understand real value can survive better when official money stops telling the truth. And now, the age of AI is showing us something just as uncomfortable. A title is not a skill. A degree is not a guarantee. A job is not security. A paycheck is not a foundation. The foundation is your ability to solve real problems under pressure. So do not leave this video afraid. Leave it awake. Respect education, but do not worship credentials. Use technology, but do not become replaceable by it. Earn money, but understand value. Keep your job, but build a skill that can live outside that job. Because the next crisis may not arrive with tanks in the street or banks closing overnight. It may arrive as inflation. It may arrive as layoffs. It may arrive as software. It may arrive as one cold email saying your position is no longer needed. And when that day comes, the market will not ask what you used to be called. It will ask what you can still fix. Produce, protect, explain, build, sell, carrefour, or organize. That is the lesson of every collapse. In good times, society rewards appearance. In hard times, reality rewards usefulness. And the people who survive are not always the most decorated. They are the ones whose value does not disappear when the system changes. So build that value now, before the world forces you to prove it